The news from Afghanistan continues to be tragic. Christians being persecuted, women and children being torn from their homes, and families being executed. And the administration doesn't seem to be doing much about it at all. We need to continue to pray. Meanwhile, back in the United States, the Taliban is being compared to pro-life Americans. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Well, again, welcome to Church Public. I'm really glad that you joined me here today. There is so much going on in the world, and I don't have time to talk about everything, but I wanted to choose a couple of stories that I think are of note that we need to understand about for a Christian worldview and how we deal with it from day to day. So I just wanted to tell you about a few things, and if you missed any of the previous episodes, you can go to churchpublic.com or any of the podcast subscription sites and find Church Public there. I do appreciate if you subscribe and give a rating. That really helps. And then if you share it with some friends, I would appreciate that too, because I'm just trying to get the word out about what is going on in this world and how we are, as believers, supposed to deal with it. See, a lot of news out there. There is mainstream news that tends to be more and more left-wing. There is conservative news that is sometimes accurate, but not necessarily as biblically based or heartfelt. And so I'm trying to fill that void. I'm trying to help you understand from a biblical worldview. We're always going to come back to the Bible. We're always going to look at it from a theological lens, because this is all about how we deal with the world, how we deal with God from a biblical perspective. So thank you for being part of this today. So there's just a lot going on in Afghanistan. I am getting a bunch of reports from this happened to be one of them. I'm not going to play it for you. The face, if you're not watching, has been blacked out. This is from a Christian leader in the area of Afghanistan. That goes on for several minutes, but basically they're saying that they don't know what's going to happen. And I guess I would say two things. One, we need to pray. We need to pray for their safety. We need to pray for their deliverance, but also we need to pray that the 20 years of ministry that they've done there has value. And we know that it does. We know that God says that the seeds that are planted in his name will come to fruition. So that's a good thing. And we don't have to worry about losing hope. But unfortunately, some of these people, in literal fear for their lives, are beginning to lose hope, and that's really hard. And so we need to pray for their security, safety, and encouragement while praying for those that have been ministered to, and even the enemies right now, that they would find Jesus, because God is not beyond anybody. As we read through different stories, even the story of Jonah, where Jonah didn't want to hang out with the Ninevites. He thought they were beyond saving, and God said, no, they're not beyond saving. We need to go and we need to take care of them so that they can find Jesus. At any rate, we need to pray in all of those fronts. I'm seeing sources here that say the Taliban are going door to door, taking women and children. The people must mark their house with an X if they have a girl over 12 years old, so that the Taliban can take them. If they find a young girl and the house was not marked, they will execute the entire family. I'm not even going to read anymore. It's a really bad situation, and we need to really appreciate the severity of this situation and pray for those that are unfortunately stuck in this country, because they cannot get out. The borders are closed. There's no way to, very limited ways to escape at this point. So many of the Christians are going up into the hills. One of the reasons Afghanistan, we talked about earlier, you can go back and listen to the Afghanistan episode at churchpublic.com, but one of the reasons this region is so brutal and is so contentious is, and that some of the terrorists were able to hide for so long there, is the hilly nature of it and the caves. But fortunately right now, some of the Christians are going back into these caves and they are hiding. So that is actually a positive in the geography of the region. There's a report here that the Taliban are searching phones. So they're grabbing people's phones. And if you have a Bible app downloaded on your phone, they will execute you on the spot. This is this is just it's terrible news, and it is really sad to hear about all of this that is going on. There is a news organization, or actually a witnessing, a Christian organization called Sat7, and they have, I believe they're based in Cyprus, but they broadcast in at least 3 languages the gospel to regions all around the Middle East, but also to Afghanistan. So the good news is, and it can be encouraging to those that are there, and it can be encouraging to us knowing that the gospel is still going out, this news service, Christian news organization, that is sending out the good news of the gospel still to this area over the satellite. And at the moment, the satellite cannot be blocked. And that's really great news that the gospel is still going out. We can take hope, take heart that though these persecutions are brutal and they're terrible, we need to pray against them. We need to pray and ask this administration to do more than they're doing, because at the moment they're not doing very much. And many people are super frustrated, including myself, that this administration is doing basically nothing. I even heard a report that for an American to get a flight, there's at least, or around, it's very unclear, numbers are very unclear, but there's around 10,000 people who are still stuck in Afghanistan that are Americans. And the administration has said it's going to be about $2,000 that you have to pay for a flight back. Meanwhile, in America, still, we've passed the 1,000,000-mile mark, or the 1,000,000-person mark of people that have come across the southern border illegally. The illegal immigrants from the south, are being put on buses and planes and sent across America on taxpayer dollars. So I don't want to say hypocrisy, that's just such an overused word at this point, but the double standard in this instance is just really hard to stomach, I would say. So at any rate, we need to pray for the safety of the Americans returning home. We need to pray for the safety of the Christians. Many of the Christians in Afghanistan are Afghans because they have been trained over the past 20 years. Missionary organizations and other locals have been trained in sharing the gospel and are there to share the gospel. So they can't leave because they're not refugees and they're not necessarily in danger according to state guidelines, but they're in grave danger according to Taliban guidelines. Because again, anybody who is a Christian, anybody who opposes this, I said the other day that this is a theological war, and it is a holy war. It is about 2 warring faiths, and one of them has an intent of killing everybody who doesn't agree, while the other wants to love you to Jesus. Those are vastly different worldviews, and we are seeing those crash in real time in this instance, and it is really, really sad. Taliban are going house to house and looking for Christians. I will just leave it at that in this instance, and just ask that you continue to pray. I posted that the other day, and just believe strongly in the power of prayer. The power of prayer can change things, not just spiritual things, but physical things. God is powerful, and when we tap into that power, maybe you have something that you can do. I don't know. I don't know what God is going to do in this situation. It seems dire, but we hold strong to the confidence that God is in control, even when this situation appears to be spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, this situation is an interesting situation in the fact that people are using it. I guess I would just say people are using it for political purposes, and this is super frustrating. And you can accuse me of that, I guess, at some point. I'm not trying to be political. What I'm trying to do is show you the world, show you what they're doing, and show you what the Bible says about it. If that feels political, it could be. I mean, everything in essence is political, and that's been something that the left has created, because when you go out into the root word, the polis, the city, when you go out into the city, when you go out into the public square, you do things and you bring yourself with you, and you have an inherent theological base, whether or not you believe in God. I'm just saying, we all worship something. We just do. You could worship God. You could worship the God of the Bible, as we see in the Middle East. You could worship the God of the Quran. You could worship the state. You could worship science. You could worship your kids. There are a lot of things you could worship, and you bring that wherever you go. So everything is both theological and political, because the politics then involves how are you going to argue for or against certain policies to bring into effect the end result of what you want the city and the city state to look like. So in essence, everything is political in that sense. But unfortunately, I don't know what to say. Some people they're just in a different place. So while we're talking about Afghanistan and the Taliban, and I talked all about them the other day, so again, you can go and listen to that episode. But in a nutshell, the Taliban are very religious Muslims who really want to impose this law based on their religion, which is called Sharia law. And this religious law then carries with it all sorts of things, as we're seeing with women and children, very unfortunate and terrible things with regard to them, and many other things. And in terms of Muslim versus Christian in the Taliban and in this sect of the Muslim faith, it's death. If you don't agree, if you don't follow, then your sentence immediately is death, right? So again, as we talked about, this is a holy war. And it's important to understand this is what the Taliban believes and what they do. So in essence, we talk about hypocrisy all the time, talk about double standards. The Taliban do not have double standards, and they are not hypocritical. They believe these things. They act on these things. It's incredibly brutal, and it's terrible, but they are not hypocritical in this way. They believe it strongly enough to act on it, and act on it to the death. And as Christians, we believe that all life is valuable. So I want to show the other side of the coin. And we believe all life is valuable because God says that you are made in his image. He says that you have inherent worth. He says he knew you before he created you. These are really important parts of our faith because they are the view that God has on you. And then, as Jesus says, we're supposed to love one another. In essence, giving that view of humanity, the value of humanity, the value of individuals to everyone that we meet, and we're supposed to love them in that way, which leads to the ideal that we need to value every human life, whether it is old or young. And of course, that leads us to the idea of protecting unborn lives, and those unborn lives cannot protect themselves, which is why we need to stand up and protect people where they cannot protect themselves. There is this argument that an unborn life is not a life. There's an argument that for some reason unborn lives have no value because they haven't yet come into the world. And on its face, that is just a ridiculous, it's ridiculous, which is why you have these euphemisms that are meant to cajole you into something different, cajole you into thinking that an unborn life is not a life, and then you say, well, this is just women's health care because it's the health of a woman. And there may be an aspect of the health of a woman. However, there is a human inside a pregnant woman, and that human is a life too. So to say it's health care of one person is to literally split the baby in Solomon's terms. And it's just this ludicrous fallacy that we've invented that a lot of people just, believe to be true. And this idea of women's rights being the right to kill, it just doesn't make any sense. I read a story the other day where this woman threw her, I believe, 6 or 7 month old baby off a balcony. And that is a terrible evil. And yet, if the woman had killed the baby in utero several months earlier, it would have been celebrated. And this is the tragedy of our generation. This is the biggest tragedy and offense of our generation. There are people all over the social media world that are celebrating their abortions. It is grotesque and terrible. So we're back to now connecting the Taliban and America. Here is what MSNBC says about abortion. Afghan women's rights are threatened. This is the headline if you're not watching. Afghan women's rights are threatened, but the GOP is not their champion. So this article is about the conflation of the Taliban, who we've talked about. And I'll just refresh again. They go door to door. They're now marking with an X doors. They're saying that the families need to mark with an X doors that have women in them, because they're going to take the women and they're going to use them as sex slaves marry them and then possibly sell them into slavery. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible atrocity. So the MSNBC columnist says that the Taliban are just like those in America who are pro-life. In other words, the people that we talked about, the Taliban, that are stealing women, killing men, women, children, families, killing Christians, being basically like 8th century warlords, are just like those that want to save the lives of the unborn babies. I'll read you a couple of quotes from that just so you get a full context of what this is happening here. All right, so this is a quote from the article. Look, nobody is saying the GOP and the Taliban are equally bad, but in the past few months, we've seen Republicans champion measures to deprive women of freedom over their own bodies, as well as oppose laws to protect women from violence and ensure women are paid the same wages as men. And they've done so, at least in part, to impose their religious beliefs on all others, end quote. The first thing we need to notice in this is, I'm not saying the GOP and the Taliban are equally bad, but that's where the statement should end. The Taliban and the GOP, or the Taliban and Republicans, or the Taliban and anybody, are not equally bad. I mean, maybe there's a few people who are as bad as the Taliban, but equating the Taliban with basically anybody is a ridiculous statement on its face. It just is unequivocal. Like, I can't even. It's ridiculous. So their equation here is, in that last line that you heard, to impose religious beliefs on all others. So the equation is, because the Taliban are operating on religious beliefs, which we've outlined today and in the past episode, go and listen to that, and Christians operate on religious beliefs, which, again, Taliban operate on the beliefs based in the Quran and the Sharia law that anyone who does not subscribe to the faith needs to be persecuted and most likely killed, and women are essentially property, is the same as, in this reporter's mind, Christians who would say your number one goal is to love God and love others, do to others as you would like to be treated, etc., talking biblical things now, right? I'm going to read some more quotes for you. This is a quote. The ability of women to control their own bodies should be a guaranteed human right, yet most of the GOP seems desperate to withhold it from them. This goes back to a couple of episodes ago where I talked about rights. Why is a woman's right to kill another human a guaranteed human right? That's not a right. It's not constitutional. It doesn't come from government. Again, rights, we talked about this. I'm not going to go into the full effect, but rights come from God, and those rights from God are then protected by the government. That's how America is supposed to work. That's, in fact, how all governments are supposed to work. The government doesn't give you rights. Your ideology based on some idea that a woman should be able to control her body and anything in her body, even an autonomous human, and thusly kill that human because science, is not a right. It's not reality, and it is really an affront to the morality of humanity, in terms of, if you believe you have the right to kill a human at any time because of any reason, as this person is saying, then why stop in the womb? Why stop in utero? And why not just kill any child whenever they're inconvenient to you? And of course, everyone would look at that and say, well, that's immoral and that's terrible. I agree. I agree 100%. Murder is murder no matter the age. If you have an old person, and we hear more and more about, if a person gets too old, they have dementia, you should just help them die because their life needs to end. Why? Who made you God? Like, literally the question is, who made you God, and you get to decide that person should die? Same principle applies in utero. Who made you God, and you get to decide a baby needs to die? You are not, while a mother, yes, is responsible for a baby. 100%, totally true. The mother has some autonomy, like control over the baby. However, the mother doesn't just get to arbitrarily decide that the baby needs to die. In what world is this good? but apparently in America, in our world, and apparently trying to stop. So here's the difference, right? This article is saying Taliban, who steal women and children, kill families, kill Christians, is the same as a person in America who says babies should live. Those are the same, according to them. My brain has exploded, and I don't know what to say anymore. It's just we've entered a new level of praise. So I'm going to read one more quote for you from this article. If the GOP wants to show it sincerely is concerned with the rights of women in Afghanistan, it can start by first championing the human right of women in the U.S., but instead it's doing all it can to prevent gender equality while oppressing women based on members' extreme religious beliefs. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say about that anymore. I think I've said all I need to say. Equating people in the Taliban with people who want women to not kill their babies, on its face, it's just ludicrous. I don't think I can be convinced otherwise. So I'm going to leave it at that. I do want to show you one more thing about the Taliban. And if you are listening, I will explain this to you. This is a tweet that I actually just saw this morning. And this tweet says, the Taliban allow no liberty of conscience. They are like #Christian nationalists and other American Christian fundamentalists. The implication of this tweet is, again, the Taliban, because they're a religious organization, as we've gone over and over again, is the same as Christian nationalists, whatever that means, according to this quote. I couldn't tell you exactly what they mean, and American Christian fundamentalists. Apparently both are now bad things. So this is a huge conflation. There are people who have made America their God. That is not good. It's not good for America to be your God. However, America does afford, as we've gone over again and again and again, certain inalienable rights, certain liberties that we have protected by the government, like the right to worship, the right to have freedom, the right to not kill people that you don't like. Those are good things. To say the Taliban, once again, that kills the people that it doesn't like, are the same as Christians who want to love people they don't like, love people that don't like them. This is you can love your friend, you can love your family, you can love your neighbor. It's hard to love your enemy, and yet God tells us, love your enemy. That's what Jesus says. Love your enemy. The Taliban says, kill your enemy. Kill anybody who looks like your enemy. In no world are those two the same thing. And yet we have people saying, oh yes, these are the same thing. Therefore, because the Taliban are motivated by religious beliefs and Christians are motivated by religious beliefs, they are both the same. And here is the equation. They are both oppressive and they both must be stopped. Do you see where this goes? This is going towards the place in America. This is why this is important to us, people. This is important to us because in America, there are going to be people who say, because you are a follower of Jesus, because you are a Christian, you must be silenced. You must be stopped. This is what is happening in Afghanistan. It's happening in countries all over the world. China, it's happening really huge right now. There are big issues in China with freedom, especially religious freedom, especially if you are a Christian. In America now, there are people like this person who are going to say, you must conform, you must follow after what they want you to do. You cannot be a Christian. This is coming. It's coming fast. We've seen it in Canada. We've seen it in England. We've seen it in Australia. We're seeing it in America, and we will continue to see it as this administration and those that support it continue on. This world hates you because you love Jesus. This was told to us by Jesus himself, and we are going to see it more and more. We've been in this wonderful, bountiful, free season of life where you can just worship whomever you want to worship. You can go to church whenever you want to go to church. You can love God in the way that you want to love God. That season is either quickly ending or, as I would say, is really over already. We just haven't fully apprehended what that means, and these types of tweets are really part of that. There's a couple other things going on in the news, but I am going to save them for another time because of time, and I want you to keep coming back. So thank you for being with me today. I'll continue to look into some things. There's a Hobby Lobby case that Hobby Lobby actually just lost a battle where they have to pay a person who is transgender, who they did not allow into the women's restroom. Again, to be as clear as I can, that means a male who believes they are a female in the women's restroom. Hobby Lobby did not allow the male, biologically, who believes they are a female, ideologically, into the physical women's restroom with women and girls. Seems like a no-brainer, and yet in the courts, Hobby Lobby has lost this suit. They will probably continue along these lines, but on the onset, like that's an issue that I'm going to be watching, because it purports a sad state of America where we cannot keep our women and children safe. Not in the exact same way that we're seeing in the Taliban, but there are people who just put ideology over the freedom and safety of our, again, most vulnerable population, children. We must protect the children. It is so important. And there are people who don't care. They're pushing for pedophilia and a bunch of other things. Yes, there are court cases saying that should be legalized. This is a hard time to live. I said the other day, and I'll end with this. It was a G.K. Chesterton quote, and it was talking about dragons and how fairy tales. I don't have the quote right in front of me. I'm gonna paraphrase it, but you can go back and look at my account and see it. Fairy tales don't teach children that dragons exist. Children already know that dragons exist. Fairy tales and myths teach children that they can kill the dragons. This is such a great point, and it's such an important point, and I want to end on it because I want to end with hope. And G.K. Chesterton, was a great theologian, but he illustrates to us that I have been guilty. I can admit that. I have been guilty of telling my children, I'm really sorry you were born in this time, because the time that I was born in and when I was a child and grew up, there was a lot more freedom, there was a lot more safety in terms of being able to speak your mind and live in the truth of the gospel. That time is, again, either ending or has ended. But I love this quote because it helps us to remember we don't have to live in fear. We don't have to live in fear of the government. We don't have to live in fear of the powers of this world. God has overcome already. We are just living in this chaos until Jesus comes again and sets everything permanently right. So we're not telling kids that we're sorry that there are dragons in the world. They already know there are dragons in the world. What we're telling kids is they can be dragon slayers. I love that. I think we need to instruct our kids in this, teach our kids how to be dragon slayers. And what I'm talking about specifically is not mythological. I'm talking about reading the Bible, telling them the truth of the gospel, giving them the armor of God, as we read about in Paul, and allowing them to be warriors for Jesus in the truth and light of Jesus Christ. That is our role. That is our goal. Do always say God bless you, and I hope that you are able to keep the faith.